Hello, welcome to another local author chat with the Camas Public Library. My name is Ellen Miles. I am the outreach librarian, and I am here today with Gary Corbin, local author. Thank you so much, Gary, for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I have a whole bunch of questions I'm going to ask you, but my first one is really just, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I grew up in a town very similar to Camas, but on the other side of the country. It's called Agawam, Massachusetts. It's a mill town. It's a suburb of a larger city. It's about 20,000 people, and it's located on a river surrounded by mountains. Sound familiar?
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we moved to, my partner and I moved to Camas in 2014 after several years living in Vancouver. I moved to the Portland area in 1993, so just over 30 years ago, after having lived in different parts of the country, including Louisiana, Indiana, and Washington, D.C. I retired from professional work for other people in 2019 and have been writing full-time or retired full-time, depending on your point of view, ever since. My mom actually believes I was retired at the age of 50. So you can figure out what that date is and mark it accordingly.
That's great. That's great. Well, hey, what was it like to write your books or all your books? Because I know that Mother of Valor is not your first book.
No, yeah, Mother of Valor is the 9th book, actually, that I've published. So it really has varied. The first book was very painful, and it took a long time. My first book, Lying in Judgment, the idea for it actually came to me while I was living in DC. So before I had moved to this area, I was at a party with a friend, and he was chatting about his jury duty experience that he was going through at the time. And he said, the judge had directed them to ignore some testimony that had just been given. And it occurred to me, how do you ignore something that was just said to you, and it's apparently very riveting testimony, but it was technically, for some reason, had to be thrown out. And that idea just kept kicking around in my head and morphing around to different things. And I thought about, well, what if the juror actually knew something that no one else knew? Well, how would they know that? What if they were the criminal and they were serving on the jury? And that just evolved into it being a murder trial. And that's where Lying in Judgment came from. And so that book is about a guy serving on the jury of a murder trial for the crime he committed. The problem was I didn't know how to write a book at that time. I was in IT. I had studied political science. I had done a dissertation, which is book length. I had done a lot of tech writing. I had done some creative writing, but I hadn't done a novel before. And I discovered that that's a very different process, and even different than journalism, which I had also done some of. It's just a whole different enterprise. And I had to learn how to write in a format that was readable for a novel. I had to learn how to organize a novel, and all the tricks and techniques about story reveal and character reveal and all of that. So it took me until 2016 to actually get the book done, over 25 years. So very long, very painful, but very interesting.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So 25 years for just your first one.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Luckily, it's gone faster since.
How did your books get published? Like from your first all the way to your 9th?
Well, for a long time, I tried the traditional publishing route. I tried to get an agent and an editor. I went to conferences. I did book pitches. I thought I actually had an agent after I went to the Willamette Writers Conference in 2004 and then 2005. And in 2005, I pitched my story. There was an agent there that was really excited about it. And I thought, I did it in my first try. I got an agent. But it didn't pan out. So I tried for several more years, had no more success. And the editors and agents and publishers kept saying, look, this story of yours, Lying in Judgment, this protagonist is, not terribly likable. He's the bad guy. I don't know how to sell that book. And they liked the story, they liked the writing, but they didn't think they could market it. But I thought, well, maybe you can't, but I can. So I learned as much as I could about self-publishing. I had a number of friends who had gone that route. And in 2016, I woke up one morning and said, you know what, if I never get this done, that would be the one thing I regret. So I learned as much as I could. I got on Amazon sites and Smashwords and all these different self-publishing sites, and figured it out. And I self-published in March of 2016. And then lo and behold, for the first few months, sales were kind of slow, but then after a few months, all of a sudden it took off. It was actually July 4th of that year. All of a sudden, on that day, sales went through the roof, and it reached number 21 on Amazon.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was shocking and wonderful.
Yeah. And then is the rest history?
Well, as it turns out, no. I mean, yes and no. The second book that I had, Mountain Man's Dog, and that was a whole different series, and also did really well. But it's been really hard replicating that success on the other books. And it's just been a mystery. Why did those two do so well and the others, which I think are better books, not do as well? It's really crazy. I still haven't gotten an answer to that yet.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What a mystery. What a mystery. So your most recent book, Mother of Valor, did you do a different process or same process?
Yeah, my process has evolved over the years. So, that first one was just, I don't even know if you can call it a process. I just kept writing until eventually I got to the end. And I revised it. I think I had 17 official drafts of that book. And not just minor edits, just like, okay, no, I'm starting over. I'm going to, do a major revision, 17 different ones. And I knew I had to come up with a process because that wasn't going to be it. So I use a process called sketching. So in the industry, people talk about the two major types, which is plotters who, kind of do a major detailed outline, and they follow that in the writing of the book, and pantsers, people who sit down at the keyboard and just write, which is kind of how I did the first book, and it didn't work for me. So I did not want to do these extreme detailed outlines either. So what I do now is I conceive of the major characters in the book and try to come up with as much as I can about those characters, the protagonist, the antagonist, and see where they come in conflict with each other. And I let that sort of drive the development of the plot. And the plot then is just a sketch. It's several sentences maybe is all I'll really need to get going. What really drives them, what blocks them, what sort of their weaknesses are, and how those intersect. And similarly with the setting, I try to work with the setting in a similar way. How does that become both a help and a hindrance to each of the characters, and work that through? And then I sit down to write. And that seems to work a lot better. I feel like I have better creativity, but also I have a strong direction when I sit down to write. I know where this thing's going to go. I just don't know all the different twists and turns that it's going to take to get me there. And it becomes a lot more fun.
Well, that's good. Yeah, fun's important. So during that whole process, whether that was like early or late in your process there, was there anything that really surprised you?
Well, one thing was really that first, how hard it is to write a book. I thought because I had always been a writer of some sort, writing always came easy to me, but writing a novel is just a whole different enterprise. And the second is how to sustain the sales success and how to market a book, it's so much harder than it looks. I thought, after that first one, hey, and actually Mountain Man's Dog, which I thought, hey, I'm replicating the success. The first 2 books are both doing really well. And then it just didn't continue with the others. And I was like, well, I'm doing the same things, I'm, even improving the writing and improving the story. So why isn't it working as well? And I have the same cover artist, all of that stuff. So those were big surprises. And I guess just discovering too how many people are out there trying to write books. Going to these conferences, joining Willamette Writers and other groups, it's just amazing how many books there are being developed. Much less how many are on the shelves, because many more never get to that point. It's really an eye opener when you really get under the covers of this industry and see what's going on.
That's really interesting. Well, do you have any advice that you would give an aspiring author?
The first piece of advice I would give, ironically, is ignore most of the advice that you get from people in the business. And I say that because the business changes every day and nobody has mastered it all and nobody can keep up. So whatever someone is telling you is just their own snapshot, their own experience. And, while valuable, a lot of it just won't apply. So, take it, listen to it, but take it with a big grain of salt. I would say that goes for advice about writing too. A lot of the advice you get from writers, like at conferences and workshops, is really irrelevant. The rules they tell you to follow get ignored routinely by successful authors. I read book after book, and sometimes I can't even get through them because I'm just so upset at the writing. They're breaking all the rules. And it's frustrating because, people, the experts, the successes will tell you, and including people like agents and editors who you're pitching to, say, well, you have to do X, Y, and Z to get your book sold. And you pick up the next book and they haven't done any of that. However, I would say that to writers, listen to your readers, because they will tell you what you're doing right or wrong. They're the ones that you're trying to reach anyway. They're the ones you want to buy your book, to read your book, and to tell others about your book. And what readers, if I had to summarize what readers tell me, it's write with courage. Don't shy away from things. Right, just be as courageous as you can, as vulnerable as you can in your writing, and develop your own unique voice, because that's what they're looking for. And I would say the only advice I would say to listen to from other writers is don't stop writing. The only way to get better as a writer is to keep writing. So write every day, write as often and as much as you can. Don't give up. It took me 25 years and it became a top-selling book. So it can happen.
Yeah, amazing. Well, do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to people?
Actually, the book I just finished, which I checked out of the Chemist Library, in fact, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Absolutely outstanding book. And I've liked her work for a long time, but this one was just gripping. The last 200 pages, I just couldn't put it down. I was up way too late at night reading that book. And she does all the things that I think writers want to do. She writes with courage. She really knows what she's talking about. And she is the master of narrative character voice. The character narrator of that book is so amazing. It's so unique and it's unrelenting. And it is challenging, yet at the same time, so readable. And the story itself is compelling. So I would tell everybody read that book. And I know she just won, I think, the Pulitzer for that book, which I didn't know at the time that I checked it out, or maybe she hadn't yet. But just outstanding and well deserved.
Great. I'll link to that book in our library catalogs. I know we have that in regular
I know
print.
you do too.
Print too, I think. Yeah, I'll link to that in the YouTube show notes, so people can find that. That's great.
Yeah.
We did have a couple of questions from the audience
Okay.
in. So Suri from Camus wants to know, do you think there's going to be another book in the Valerie Dawes thriller series after this?
Actually, yes. I just finished the first draft of the 5th book in that series. It will pick up about 2 months in calendar time after Mother of Valor, and with another case, another urban terrorism type of case. And I would expect that that will be out in early 2024, and it will be in the Camus library because I always donate copies as soon as it comes out.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate that. Okay, Maxine from Vancouver asks, how do you feel after a really long writing session?
Exhausted and exhilarated. I usually quit because I have to, because I'm just too tired to go on. And I don't get long writing sessions often enough. It's just part of my day, so it's rare that I'll get one that's more than a couple hours at a time. But when I do, I usually get into such a zone that I can't even tell that time has gone by. And I stop essentially. Not only am I tired, I'm usually hungry, and I run out of energy. So I get real excited about the characters and the plot and the place, because I'm writing about a fictional place as well. So that can be just so absorbing that a lot of times I think, oh, I want to just have a quick meal and get right back to it, but I don't, because I know better. I need to have the energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, Gary, how can people find you and your books?
Well, my books are at the Camus Library, at least a bunch of them. I don't know if all 9 are there at this point, but I know that Mother of Valor, the most recent one, should be there, because I donated that one just a few months ago, actually. They are available on Amazon. You can Google my name, Google Mother of Valor by Gary Corbin, it'll come up. They are available at Vintage Books in Vancouver, as well as a few other area bookstores like Broadway Books and Jan's Books, the small indies. The audio books, let's see, 7 of them are available on audio, on Audible and ACX, and other, wherever your favorite audiobooks are. I think they're actually available through the library that way too, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's a resource called Indie Bound, which is a resource for finding independent bookstores. And if you query your favorite author or book on Indie Bound, it'll tell you where to go find them at an independent bookstore, which is awesome.
Wonderful.
And you can always look me up on Facebook.
Cool. Well, I'll provide links to all of those places that people can find you and your books in the show notes for the YouTube video. So look for the links there. So would you like to read an excerpt from your book?
Sure. I'll read an excerpt from Mother of Valor. This excerpt is the start of chapter 5, which may seem like an unusual place, but it's a section where the action really gets pretty hot, or it gets pretty tense. So here we go. The sun had set, but plenty of ambient light remained, washing the evening sky with a mix of pinks and blues behind the silhouettes of the abandoned industrial buildings on Albany Street. Police in dark blue uniforms and helmets took position on the perimeter of the property, fenced on 3 sides with weathered chain link that looked weak enough to knock down with a good stiff push. Val and Grimes crouched beside their squad car, Grimes on his radio, giving last-minute instructions in a low voice. Val checked her gear one more time. Sidearm loaded, safety on. Spare ammo ready. Taser charged. Club check. Cuffs secure. Gas mask ready to wear. Radio on. Earbuds in. No one would give away their location through an errant blast of static or voice communication. Ready, Dawes? Grimes said at last. She nodded. He pointed to the warehouse, a 2-story rectangle of sheet metal, painted blue 50 years before, and now flecked with silver and black. In front, a wide metallic front door marked the official business entrance, next to a garage-style roll-up unit for loading and unloading. A white rectangle hanging over the door had long ago displayed a corporate logo, lit up during business hours. All that remained now were shards of plastic and a few loose wires. Follow me, Grimes said. He followed up with a terse moving in to the rest of the team by radio and led Val in a crouched trot toward the warehouse. A half-dozen SWAT team members followed, rifles at the ready. When they reached the building, Grimes nodded to Hodges, the SWAT team leader, who tried the door. Locked, of course. He waved them all back, attached something to the door frame, then scooted away, pressed a button on a handheld device. Val expected a loud bang, so the low-key woof sound surprised her. The door swung open toward them, the locking mechanism a smoking, ruined mess. Love high-tech explosive, don't you? Grimes said with a grin. He led them inside, Val on his heels, SWAT team members spreading out into the cavernous space that greeted them. Grimes flicked a switch, and a few bare bulbs hanging from metal rafters provided dim light, just enough to move around. The room spanned at least 40 feet wide and 20 feet deep, with no ceiling other than the slanted metal roof. A front service desk sat to one side, more a formality than an obstacle. Gray shelves lined each wall and formed rows from front to back, empty save for some trash left behind by squatters and vagrants. We're in, Shannon's voice said in Val's ear. The rear entry team. Us too, Grimes said. Meet you in the middle. They conducted a cursory search of the room and, as expected, found nobody. You want the gas now? Hodges asked on the radio. Not yet, Grimes said. Let's get a visual first. I want to find those stairs. Val recalled the building schematic. Behind the room's rear wall, the warehouse had been divided into 2 levels. At one time, forklifts and freight elevators moved cargo in and out as needed. The manager's office, which their targets had taken over, according to the informants, occupied the front left corner of the 2nd level. Hodges postulated that the gunmen would position themselves up there, with clear sight of the stairs in both entrances. Shannon's team, entering from the rear by the utility rooms and restrooms, should be waiting at the door. No doubt the gunmen heard them come in. They'd be ready too. Val crept to the entrance, this time leading the charge. She glanced through the tiny window. Too dark to see much. Tried the handle. Unlocked. She took a deep breath, checked in with Grimes. He nodded and waved her inside. She opened the door, and all hell broke loose.
That is very thrilling. So thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, so Gary, I will direct people towards your the books at the library's website and your website and Amazon page and all that great stuff. Thank you so much for joining me for a chat today, and I'll see you at the library sometime.
Yeah, thanks very much. Hope to see you there.
Yep, see you then. Bye.
Bye.